everything that I've seen of it. It's like,
Yeah.
I hate that. You know, I work in local government, I volunteer with different local government, it's like, I don't.
End of this week.
You know?
Welcome to the November 20th, 2023 Long Range Planning Committee Subgroup Meeting for the Pentagon Center PDSP Amendment. I'm Jim Lantelmi, and I'm chairing this meeting tonight. We're holding this hybrid public meeting, which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia per the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy adopted July 7, 2022. Members of the LRPC subgroup for Pentagon Center are participating both here in person and virtually through electronic means. To orient everyone to our hybrid environment, I will be covering a few specifics about how tonight's meeting is going to be run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided on the LRPC webpage, the project webpage, the county's events calendar, and the email notification sent to LRPC email subscribers. Additionally, there's a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use that. For our subgroup members joining virtually, if anyone loses internet connectivity during today's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep your phones and devices muted until you're called upon. Turn off the sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference because they're not in sync. For our virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed, and I'll address when it's appropriate to turn it on in a moment. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat is active to serve two purposes. For LRPC subgroup members who need technical assistance, and for members of the public to add their names to the list for public comment, which will be taken at the end of the meeting. Teams chat should not be used for discussion. Those who are planning to provide public comment will still need to do so at the end of this meeting, as the chat will not serve as that opportunity. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public comment period. If the subgroup members participating virtually wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of this meeting, turn on your video feed then and raise your virtual hand in Teams, and we'll be monitoring the video feeds so we know who is wanting to speak. Subgroup members who are participating via phone today, without the video option, please announce your name and group you are representing now, and I'll verbally check in to see if you wish to be recognized as you do not have the video feed option. So do you have anybody who looks like they're on the phone? I didn't see it.
There was one.
One?
Five.
Okay, there's one person on with an 845 phone number. Just, hey, never mind. For members of the public who'd like to provide feedback and comment, you'll be called upon to speak at the end of the meeting, and you'll be allotted 2 minutes to speak on tonight's agenda item. Speaking time allotted will depend on the number of speakers we have this evening. If you wish to speak, please enter your name in the meeting chat for the virtual attendees. Provide staff with your name if you're here in the room right now. Lastly, this is a public forum. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county's website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act requirements. That out of the way, let's go around the room, both in the room and virtually, to know who is attending and who is going to be at the table tonight. So we'll start to my left.
Matt Suzek, Bronson County Planning.
Abby Oakland, Kimco Development.
Greg Reed, Kimco.
Evan Pritchard, Cozen O'Connor, I'm Kimco's land use attorney.
Pam Van Heim, Pedestrian Advisory Committee, live in Aurora Highlands.
Okay. My name's Tony Steiner.
Leah Sarley, also with the Planning Commission.
Chrissy Wallentish, Planning Division.
And around the back there,
Nick Giacobbe, Aurora Highlands Civic Association alternate.
Walter Gonzalez, Department of Parks and Recreation.
very good. Okay, let's go online to see who's here. I noticed we have a couple of commissions, members of other commissions who are attending. Right there, you can go ahead. Hey, dog.
Hello.
Okay, Chris, you can go first. Go first.
Chris Slack, representing the Transportation Commission.
And who's next to you?
That's Nixie, and she's saying hi.
Good. Caroline?
Carolyn Haynes with the Forestry and Natural Resource Commission.
Steve Smith?
Steve Smith, partner with Cooper Carey.
Jeff Krebs?
Good evening. This is Jeff Krebs. I'm a landscape architect with VICO.
Are you getting creative with your video?
Yeah, listen that way. Gary Shriners?
Hi, I'm a new member on the Arlington County Parks and Rec Commission.
Very good. Do we have any other commissions or neighborhoods being represented? Judy? Okay, Ben?
Ben Devanza representing Southampton Condominiums, which is adjacent to the site.
Okay, Judy Freshman? You're on mute. She's here, but she's not. There you go, Judy.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay, I'm observing. I'm not an official representative of the association.
Okay, thanks for letting us know. Is there anybody else who is?
Alyssa
Gardner.
Melissa Gardner, please, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Alyssa Gardner. I'm here for Aurora Highlands Civic Association.
Very good, welcome.
Also on the line, Mike Minkowski with VICA. I'm the transportation planner.
Okay, great.
Michael Dowd.
And Michael Dowd?
Crystal Pentagon City's Council.
Mike? Is he on or is?
He is on.
Okay, you're on mute. We'll get back to you later. Okay, why don't we then move on to the presentations? We're starting off with the staff presentation, followed by the applicant.
Right. Okay. Okay, sorry, give me 1 second. Okay. All right. Good evening again. Chrissy Wallentish with the Planning Division. So we're going to kick us off with a short staff presentation to provide some background details about the site, the PDSP details, and to tee up some discussion topics for tonight. Just to make sure everyone understands what we're reviewing here tonight, the applicant has submitted an application to revise the Pentagon Center PDSP to make general changes to the site layout, density, open space, street network, and things of that sort. At this time, the request does not include a final site plan for any specific building or block development. So it's intended that this public review process focus on the more high-level changes that are being proposed, and the LRPC meetings will not be followed by SPRC meetings with this process. Okay, so for tonight's agenda, we'll have a short staff presentation followed by the applicant presentation, and then we'll go into the selected discussion topics for this evening, followed by public comment. Okay, getting into the site layout. The Pentagon Center site is approximately 17 acres and is located in Pentagon City. The site's currently developed with the Costco wholesale store, Pentagon Center Mall containing retail shops, 2 residential buildings, and a structured in-service parking lot that both serve Costco. The site is located within the boundaries of the Aurora Highlands Civic Association, and in the map in the bottom right, you can see the surrounding development sites, which include the Fashion Center Mall to the west, the 12th Street Landing site to the north, or the TSA site, for which Brookfield has an application in as well for a PDSP amendment, then the Penn Place site to the northeast, Met Park to the east, and the Claridge House Assisted Living Facility and the Southampton condos located to the south. In regard to land use, the site is designated medium office apartment hotel on the county's general land use plan, which permits densities up to 2.5 FAR for office uses, 115 units per acre for residential uses, and up to 180 units per acre for hotel uses. The site is zoned CO 2.5, which is a mixed use district. Okay, getting into the PDSP history and background, there have been several minor amendments over the years, but these are the two main things we want to highlight tonight. So the original approval of the PDSP was in 2008, and most importantly, that established the design guidelines and the Pentagon Center guiding principles, which we'll look at in a moment. It also contained a GLUP amendment, a rezoning, a PDSP with density allocations for the entire site, as well as a final site plan for phase 1. And then in 2015, there was a major amendment, major in the sense that it involved a pretty lengthy public review process that included other reallocation of residential uses, increasing building heights, modification to building layouts, similar to what we're looking at right now. And also the final site plan for phase 1 to construct both residential buildings A and C, which are the Whitmer and the Milton. Those are constructed today. And then also the above grade parking garage for Costco. Okay, the slide contains the Pentagon Center guiding principles, which were established to specify the goals and objectives for the site in the 9 areas of development that are listed above. I've gone ahead and highlighted in green for the main in green font the main takeaways from each principle, as well as aspects of each principle we'll look at to evaluate the proposed PDSP amendment's conformity with the guiding principles. So we can come back to this and pull it up throughout our discussion. Okay, I'll turn it over to Matt now to discuss the relationship of the PDSP and the sector plan.
Thanks, Chrissy. The guiding principles that we just had on the screen, pretty robust and really still in effect, that will kind of guide our conversation and review through the LRPC process. One of the things that we wanted to make sure as we're revisiting the vision for this one particular block is what is the updated vision on all the properties surrounding the site. And as we do that, partly to revisit the history and why this site was not included in the Pentagon City Sector Plan. Part of that involves the fact that the surrounding blocks were governed by a different mechanism that, with Amazon's arrival, has essentially built itself out with the historical allocation of density and uses. This block, using a similar mechanism, the phase development site plan, was much earlier in its implementation stage, still is. And therefore, there wasn't as big of a need or desire back in 2001, 2000, it's a blur now, where we wanted to really update this given where everything stands. So while that hasn't happened, and this is technically outside of the Pentagon City Sector Plan, what we do want to establish are any kind of relationships, links, and overlap with respect to some of the key topics like transportation, open space, and land use that the sector plan did speak to, and we will continue to monitor as the surrounding sites come in for redevelopment in the near and long term. So looking at the next slide, you can see that part of that's going to involve a number of different elements that you'll see in the outline of the sector plan, land use, transportation, and open space, but it's also going to involve some more subjective interpretations of what we want to see here and the interpretation of that vision as it relates to this block. So some questions that we wanted to pose and kind of continue to revisit are posted on the slide, and we're probably going to keep coming back to them to kind of help us assess the proposal in front of us. Next slide. We're going to speak to some more physical and tangible vision elements that are in the sector plan, but since we started with the guiding principles, it's important to really establish the sector plan's version of those principles, which have evolved. We try to be a little bit more succinct, so there's not a dozen different elements, but you will see some new ones. Biophilia comes up, which was not really something front and center for staff and the community back in 2015 and 2008. We also have equity. So there is, I think, some additional elements that we're going to introduce in this review to make sure that we have that consistency across Pentagon City. Next slide. Shifting gears to the more physical improvements, the sector plan did highlight the evolution of the streetscape improvements that are already planned or in the works throughout Pentagon City. This includes significant access ways and ensuring that dedicated bike lanes and other improvements are achieved with redevelopment. So you can see that corridor starting to form along different key arterials throughout Pentagon City, and that vision will continue as we continue to explore this particular block. Next slide. As redevelopment occurs, one of the significant improvements that we want to achieve on some sites more than others is increased vegetation. There are portions of Pentagon City that are very hardscaped, a lot of concrete heavy parcels that really with redevelopment, we're going to try to rebalance that distribution of vegetation as new projects come online. And this would be the same for the Pentagon Center block, where as redevelopment happens, some significant dedications to private vegetation, landscaping, and tree canopy are expected throughout Pentagon City. So this is a kind of a convenient exhibit to illustrate how that happens in more of a lot coverage type of analysis for the property in Pentagon City. Next slide. In addition to the private aspects of each site's redevelopment, we also have specific areas set aside for public parks and plazas. These mirror symbols that we've included on our general land use plan to signal where future redevelopment needs to accommodate those type of public amenities. Now, what you see here, which is pulled from the sector plan, is essentially the 2015 vision for Pentagon Center. And that's because at the time, we were still expecting and pursuing to implement that vision. So what the sector plan did is rather than trying to impose something brand new, it simply reflected the current vision that we were still trying to implement. What I think this process is going to allow us to do is revisit that vision and see how we could marry up either better or equally as well with the Pentagon City vision for the surrounding blocks while still achieving some of the underlying principles that were established in 2015. So this speaks to parks and plazas, but on the next slide, you'll also see references to the green ribbon, which do traverse east-west through this block as we continue to provide access between the eastern and western parcels, given the other segments of the green ribbon, but also other destinations like Virginia Highlands Park, like the Met Park, and additional areas that we may want to cross to, in addition to the new facilities that might be coming online. Next slide. And then lastly, away from some of the more physical improvements throughout the site, there is guidance in the sector plan that speaks to any additional density above what historically has been allocated would need to deliver at least 10% of those that density is affordable. So this is something that we specifically targeted and make sure that across the board it would be feasible, and in some instances may even increase depending on the value of the additional density that's being calculated at the time of the redevelopment. So with that, I'm going to hand things back to Chrissy.
Great. Thanks, Matt. At a very high level, this slide shows the changes that are proposed from the 2015 PDSP to the current proposal. I've called out the changes to the building placement, use type, and height, as well as location of open space, but keep in mind there are other changes including to density, parking, street grid, and so on. The applicant will go into more detail on these changes during their presentation, so this is just to provide you with an overview. Here we're showing the density and the building height tabulations, and in the red boxes are the changes from the 2015 plan. Just to highlight some major details, generally the applicant proposes to decrease retail GFA by about 77,000 square feet, and we see a significant increase in residential GFA by about 1.23 million square feet, an increase in office GFA by about 330,000 square feet, increase in hotel GFA by about 26,000 square feet. Overall, we're looking at a GFA increase of about 1.5 million square feet, which equates to an increase in FAR from 2.68 to 4.69 FAR. We also see an increase in open space of about 43,000 square feet. And then on the right, you can see the building heights are also increasing from what was approved in 2015, with the exception of building B, which will be reduced to a 2-story retail building. Moving on to the process. So Again, as I mentioned in the beginning, there is no SPRC process to follow this. This is just a PDSP amendment. So we really just envision being able to discuss this within 2 LRPC meetings, the first being tonight. We don't have a meeting on the books yet for the next meeting. We do anticipate generally spring, summer 2024 commission meetings and then county board hearing. But as everyone in this room knows, that is totally contingent on the county's review of the site plan and the PDSP as well as the public review process. So this could very well change, but for right now, this is kind of what we're anticipating. Okay, then for meeting 2 agenda topics, we will talk more about the transportation aspects of the PDSP proposal, including street networks, streetscapes, and bike lanes. As well, we can also discuss the design guidelines as well as community benefits and any other topics that may arise from this meeting we can discuss at the next meeting. Okay, so that's the end of staff presentation. I'm going to leave it here on the discussion topics for tonight's meeting, but first I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the applicant for their presentation.
Good evening. My name is Greg Reed. I'm with Kimco Realty. I'm joined by Abby Ackwick, who will be doing all the heavy lifting in the presentation. I'm just get to do the introduction of the easy part. I'm also joined with Evan Pritchard, who is our land use attorney from Cozen O'Connor. So to give a little history, back in 2014, 2015, we did the original sort of the amendment that gets us to the plan we have today. The biggest thing we were asked then, and I'll start off by saying, is Costco's not going anywhere. They still have over 20 years of control. I can still remember the one community meeting we had a couple hundred people there. And certainly at that time, it was Jeff Glazer stood up and said, Costco's not going anywhere, and probably half the meeting left. So
Arthur actually put in the flyer, Costco going away? Like 3 question marks just to fill the seats.
So Costco still has over 20 years of control. They are still not going anywhere. But we're here more because what got approved in 2015 has significantly changed to where we are today in a society of what we see in retail and office and residential. To give a little background in case you don't know, Kimco is a publicly traded company. We have over 500 assets around the country, including Puerto Rico, and over 90 million square feet of leasable area in our shopping centers. Probably about 15 years ago, we started doing multifamily. We now see it as a key with the live-work environment and adding an anchor to our shopping centers. So we have then, since then, probably entitled over 12,000 units, and it has been our goal recently to try to bring that aspect to any of our anchor shopping centers. Pentagon is a signature center for us. Recently, in a couple of years, as we mentioned, we have completed the Whitmer in 2019 with 440 units. We have also completed recently, this past spring, summer, the Milton, which is now leasing up and doing phenomenally well. Hopefully soon we'll have the retail opening in the bottom. We have Hunan coming, First National Bank, and we also have Sparkle and Pop that will be opening this spring, and we're still working on the leasing of the other couple spaces. The one thing I will always say at Kimco we have not mastered yet is somehow getting our retail to open at the same time as our multifamily. We didn't do it with Chick-fil-A and Wise Pizza, and we have not done it in this building. So hopefully we're getting better at that. So we think also joining us, I want to go through, we have Cooper Carey as our architect. I think Steve Smith is on, he introduced himself. And we have Vika is our civil engineer, landscape architect, and traffic consultant when that comes up, I guess, in our next meeting. We talk about those aspects. So with that, I will turn it over to Abby, who will go into a little more detail and walk through the project.
Hi. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Craig. We did just want to highlight that our design team is experts in Arlington County, and so these are some of the projects that our architect has done recently and in the past in Arlington County. So I'm sure you're aware of many of these beautiful buildings. And so really kind of where we wanted to focus our presentation is really what's changing and what's not, just to kind of give an overview for our discussion as we move forward today. Greg mentioned this briefly. Here it goes. Sorry, my computer's a little bit faster than the screen. These are kind of the big reasons that we're here today. Really, office has changed, retail has changed. There's a housing shortage in the Arlington County. There's also been the sector plan, which we talked about earlier, but the other big one is the future phasing. Currently, as we are, we'll talk about this a little bit more when I bring the plan up. As the plan currently stands, Costco would have to completely go away for us to move forward. This allows us to keep Costco in the interim as we move forward into phase 1. So really the first point we really wanted to talk about is how much the density increased to match what's going on with the Pentagon city sector plan. And so you can see, we mentioned this earlier, but in 2015, the FAR was 2.68. The current proposed FAR is 4.74, and the sector plan calls for a max of 9 FAR around us. And so really this is bringing us up to more in line with what's going on around, including Penn Place, as well as the TSA site, as well as the future opportunities for the Fashion Center, as well as the other properties in the Pentagon City Sector Plan. So this is kind of one of the main drivers. The next is to really create a double-sided retail street on Fern. So Matt mentioned the bike lane, the protected bike lane that the sector plan asked for on Fern. Currently in our proposal in the 2015 approval, we don't have the street section in order to do that. And so what this does is this widens the Fern street section to really create the opportunity for the 5-foot protected bike lane, as well as the 6-foot, it's 4-foot protected and then 6-foot bike lane. It also basically adds, complete streets. So we also include the setbacks for outdoor dining to kind of create even wider streets. That wasn't really a thing that everybody talked about in 2015. So really, you can see in the street section, the yellow is really the new portion, which would be in the private right of way, but it is still building based. And so we wanted to kind of talk about that. The other thing the plan does, and I'm going to flip back real quick, is that we have moved the open space. We've moved the open space from along Fern Street in order to create a double-sided retail street on Fern. And what we hope that this will do is it'll actually improve the retail that's already there today that struggles, but it'll also help our retail in the future. Retail does better when you have cross-pollination, and so you can kind of walk across the street. And so what we're hoping this does is improves that, but also creates a good environment in the future. And so what this does is it actually pulls the parkland back into the center of the site. And so it creates this opportunity for a green ribbon section that goes from the southwest to the northeast, which we think is a really exciting opportunity because it would connect Virginia Highland Park more directly with what's going on in Penn Place. And so we see that as kind of a cool connection that wasn't even thought of previously. The sector plan talks about the east-west connection. And so while on Hayes, we do foresee that to be our more urban section, we are interested in your thoughts on what a connection through that would look like. What does the Greenway Street section look like? The other thing is we are adding a 30% open space increase. And so the proposal has about 4.25 acres of park that is approximately an acre more than it was previously. So that is quite an improvement in this kind of change.
Going on, Ozzy?
I briefly mentioned this earlier, but the phasing is another reason that we're here. As you can see, the future Grant Street now in this new proposal actually allows Costco to stay in the interim on phase 1. And so because of that slight shift to move the road over, we're able to kind of move forward with redeveloping what is now Pentagon Center Mall previously, rather than waiting for Costco to kind of go away. With Greg mentioned, they have over 20 years control. We don't see them leaving until then. And so this gives us an opportunity to phase this a little bit more than waiting for them to relocate. The other thing I'd like to mention in this is we think there's an opportunity to put an interim open space here where the office building is, given the current office environment. And so this is about 22,000 square feet of open space that we could do in the interim. And we're interested in your thoughts on that, if that's something that everybody would be interested in. But again, it would be interim in waiting for the final parks that would come online when Costco does relocate. We talked about this briefly, but these are some of the community benefits that we'll talk about next time. But again, we agree with the 10% affordable housing. We're keeping the street grid. We've added the southeast to northwest connection, as well as the increase in the open space and preferred street. We did want to kind of point out where we think we're hitting the 6 sector plan principles, just so everybody knows. The street trees, as well as the trying to figure out how we can meet the 40% tree canopy for the open space, the transportation, green development with LEED Gold for new buildings, as well as creating places for people with the increased open space and the wider streetscapes for outdoor dining. And then again, kind of coordinating at a district scale to keep the street grid that goes through the site. So really, slide is, yes, so what the next is what does not change. So obviously there are tweaks to the street grid, but we're still maintaining 6 blocks in the new proposal that has active ground floor retail. As you can see on this, all the red is retail, the yellow is residential lobbies, and pink is hotel lobby, and blue is office lobby. So you can see there's quite a bit of activity on basically all fronts, street fronts. We keep service as minimal as possible, and service is focused around 14th Street, which is where the existing service at the new Milton is located. So we're trying to kind of balance what's there today and kind of keep that. We have a little bit of service on future B and E on Grand Street, but the majority is focused on 14th Street. Again, I've mentioned this, we're keeping complete streets, so there's still streetscapes with street trees, still bulb outs at intersection crossings. We're adding kind of the outdoor dining area now that was not included previously. The other change that still keeps it similar is we're now meeting the new county tree volume requirements. We've adjusted our street sectors are slightly wider to account for that calculation. The other thing is we are still maintaining the height variation where our highest buildings are at the Metro Center, and we step down as we move toward the south. So A, E are our tallest buildings, and then we have B1 and F, and then we kind of step down to the Milton where it is today, as well as in the future D building. Goes down to 120 feet right at 15th Street. So really we are keeping that kind of variated height across the property. We still have a mix of uses. Obviously, we talked about where it's slightly adjusting previously, but the big changes we're really only have 2 office towers now, and we're adding 3 additional residential towers, including one of those which now has the hotel as a stacked version and more of a mixed-use scenario. So really, we're still keeping all of that in the open space we talked about previously. So we're really trying to keep the density on the site. And that's, I think that's my last slide. Yes, so then this is kind of our proposal. So you can see how we would fit in the full neighborhood with what's proposed at Penn Place, and the Brookfield is what they proposed in 2019. So obviously pending their new application, we will adjust this. But you can see the 186,000 square feet of open space to support the 4.74 FAR of the new property.
Okay, thank you very much. We're now, well, first I want to acknowledge we do have joining us Commissioner Yara and Hamburger. Hi. Remember, everybody speak up. The microphones are in the middle of the table at the ceiling so that our online participants can hear us. We're now open for discussion at the table. Remember, our agenda items are phasing, placement and height, density, and open space location and programming. Remember, this is an LRPC, so we don't have to get into the details. That would be a site plan, and there are, as has been mentioned a number of times, there are no active applications for any new buildings on this site. this is perspective, what can be done. So we're looking mainly at the gross level, is the massing right, the height right, the placement right, but we're not getting to anything like architecture or specifically, how wide a sidewalk is, or where a loading dock is going to be, or what's going to be actually. Even though we say programming for the park, I'm not even sure that's really appropriate. That really would be part of the park and planning process. So anyway, I open it to the table now. If anybody has questions or comments they'd like to start making. If you're online, raise your team's hand if you'd like to be recognized that way. So, anything. Okay, given us, Pam.
I would talk about sidewalks. I promise not this meeting. Programming is the use, whether it's retail or office or whatever. I'm not sure what programming.
Park programming.
Park programming. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually then do have a question. In one of the phasing temporary use of the park, we have where that office building would be, we're looking to do a park. On your schematic of that, it looks like you're adding a street. Is that going to be necessary? Why do we want to put a street there, or wouldn't it be better to expand the park space, the active park space?
So we've talked about that. I think the first thought is we will have retail that is in the building on phase one, and so we talked about having an opportunity to have a drop off for them that is not on 13th Street, and so to create something that's slightly off, but also maybe an opportunity. And I don't know that we've fully figured it out, and maybe that's the opportunity to dive down into the flow-break garage. And so I think we kind of wanted the flexibility if that's where the best location for the ramp is, and have a road there, because we need to think about the phasing of the building.
Because if you're because in some of your other renderings, when you have the two buildings of B1 buildings, they like butt each other.
Yes, they will connect in the final phase. So we're just really giving ourselves optionality by having, if that's the best place for the ramp.
And then retail on the temporary street would long-term exist because the two buildings would be.
Correct. So the retail will be on the street side. So it'll be, I don't think I even see mine. It'll be on the 13th Street side. That's where the retail will be. So that gives it a full corner to have some.
I guess what I'm wondering is, does it have to be a vehicular street? I mean, I can see wanting to have a right of way maybe that people and bikes could use, but unless you're putting a loading dock there or there's a ramp going down, why would we want to have cars being able to drive through there?
So
I'm throwing that out there.
Yeah, I think.
For
Can I
consideration.
jump in here?
Yeah.
'Cause I have
Sure.
a question too. So I just want to clarify which street we're talking about. 'Cause
Yes.
I'm trying to keep up and I'm having a bit of a hard time. So are we talking about 13th?
So in the interim condition where the office building
We're
is,
talking
we're
about a thing where there's
proposing
a ladder
to
going up
not
and down
have. Yeah, so he's talking about that street that doesn't have a name that would be temporary in the
The
interim
north-south
phase.
street?
Yes.
Between, on the B1 floor?
Correct.
In the mid-block. The mid-block.
Right.
End of the day, I think we would like the flexibility to have it be a vehicular street if possible, because we don't know where the ramp will go at this point in time. We'd like to have the optionality if we need it to put it there. However, we may not need it and it could become a pedestrian. I think at this point, because we're so far out, we'd like the optionality.
The intent would be to build all the underground structure for the entire block.
Yeah,
So that
that
we
makes
would put the
sense.
garage in and everything underneath even the park area. That way we don't have, when we come back, it's basically there. We don't have to build another giant hole right next to that existing building. So working out those details is why we think we might need access into that area from the front of the building. In an interim condition until that other building is built.
That's fine. And if you wanted for flexibility, I guess I could sort of go along with it, but my preference would be to not have yet another vehicular street. If we can avoid that. I mean, I understand if you want to have it as garage access, but other than that, I'm not sure it adds anything. And I'd rather have more park space than have cars. Is sort of where I'm coming from on this.
So maybe like
It's not a huge park space.
So maybe like a Von Nerf that's just for
Yeah,
parking
that'd be
access,
fine.
but
Right,
it's,
that would be fine. Right.
but it's clear that this isn't like a shortcut for people who are driving
Exactly.
around.
Exactly, yes.
I mean, I was gonna say, it sounds like it's a pedestrian priority, some sort of treatment that we could really emphasize that, you know, it's not for, like you said, cars to just kind of shortcut. That's sort of what I was thinking.
We now have that in courthouse where your building went up right next to the subway entrance. That is, it actually, cars can actually go on it apparently, but it doesn't like cars ever will because it doesn't look like it's for cars.
You mean the Yule Street Plaza
Yeah.
for the landmark
Yeah.
block?
Yeah,
It is emergency vehicle access only.
but there's no signs there.
There are, yeah, temporary bollards, right?
No, there's not even bollards. I walked it yesterday.
Oh, wow.
There's nothing. You could drive right through.
Jim's the only one driving it. He's just.
I didn't. But anyway, but yeah.
And then I'll say there's no signage.
But nobody's driving on it because it doesn't look like something cars would drive on. So, I mean, it's well designed, I think, for that purpose, design matters. Anyway, that was my comment on that.
On that topic, if I could, can you explain what the transition would be from the space division I was discussing, pedestrian vehicular roadway, even if it's temporary, to when this B1 block, sub-block, fully redeveloped, what would be in that space once both buildings are there?
Building?
So it would be the office tower would be at the street, and then there would be parking podium between, like, connecting the two towers. So really the open space is all in Costco, and this was our thought because we're not ready to build the office building, that this would be a way to provide something in phase one.
So when you look at the plan view images of the full redevelopment, that green space between the residential and office building, is that just a roof? of
Yeah.
the-
It would be above the parking podium.
So the two towers would be on a podium.
Yeah, so we didn't mention this, but there's a lot of discussion previously in 2015 is because of the metro tunnel, we can only go below grade 1 floor on that side of the property. And so right now the plan is to have one level below grade, and then the remainder of the parking would be above active ground floor. But that is not the same on the right side of the property. That would all be below grade. We don't have that issue with the
Is that for the entire western portion of the PDSP?
Yes,
Or just
so
block B1?
So B1 only needs one level of below grade parking because it needed above grade podium. And then B1 is the only one that would have above and below similar to the Whitmer and then the Whitmer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for the people listening back home, where's the Costco? If it's staying, where is it going to be?
Exactly where it is.
Where it is today.
Oh, where it is today?
Yeah, where it is today.
Okay, so it's not moving.
No change.
For 20 years, but then it moves away. Okay.
In 20 years, we have control.
Okay.
20 plus years, we get control.
And which is it B? This is phase 2.
E.
There's no more cost.
So if you look at
It's on-
the
if you
plan
look
on
at
the
that one,
screen,
it
so you can
says-
see where Costco is, and then it
Oh,
goes away to have the 3 blocks on the right.
And maybe Abby, we should even break this up. So this is like phase 1B we're looking at with the new office building on Hayes.
Yeah.
Phase 1A is with the 22,000 square foot.
I think just to correct that, because maybe it's just between the two presentations. As far as staff's concern is, there's really no phase that looks like the image on the left, right?
Correct.
Correct, yes.
Correct.
Yes, yeah.
That phase would be where that blue
Basically,
building,
as long as Costco is
that blue
there,
building would not be there, it would be the
office
park.
building on B1 is not coming in.
So we
We
have
didn't get
20
the
years
open
worth
space.
of open space on Hayes.
At least.
Right, yeah.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that graphic should definitely switch then.
Yeah.
Yeah, very.
That wasn't
This is an
earlier, I
old-
think,
this is an
image, so.
old diagram.
Yeah, Commissioner Steinberg.
But I also want to note that there's a hand raised if that's someone, is that someone?
Oh, thank you.
So I can go after
Yeah,
him.
Ben,
He's had his hand up for a while.
Gonzo, go ahead. See your hand raised.
Thanks. My phasing question is, and it's connected to the open space. It's more for the county probably. The sector plan contemplates turning Hayes into a green ribbon. I don't believe there's a timeline for that, and I wonder what the interconnection between this project would be and the redoing of Hayes, and if there would be they would want to wait till that, if there's been any kind of conversation around the interconnection between those two projects.
So there's two things there. The sector plan envisions a north-south connection of the green ribbon, kind of taking you up from Virginia Heights Park and onto 12th Street, Brookfield property. Whenever you develop, it's going to take you further east. The segment along Hayes that would deliver that was initially and primarily envisioned on the western side of the road, and likely in a way that would still allow minimal intervention into the Simon property, the mall is. That's still a long ways away, and we need a lot of coordination with that property owner. But it was not anticipating any potential improvements on this side of the block, on the east side of Hayes. I think what the potential here is that additional connectivity across Hayes, perhaps, to have more direct east-west connections, likely onto the Met Park block, or maybe perhaps more feasible given the reorientation of the street network there, and likely updates to the phasing. But on the Hayes Street topic, one of the things the sector plan envisioned as well is a subsequent effort to really have a transportation analysis of Hayes Street, which is a very broad cross-section, already has several conflict points, given all the different buses and modes of travel that are competing there. That effort, if it were to be underway on our work plan, which it isn't, just clarifying, might shed some more light onto what the character of the segment might be.
Anything further, Mr. Fonzo?
No, I think we'll have to see what the timing of NASPRC is and when it's filed, and what, construction along Hayes would certainly is necessary, but also disruptive. And so it seems like aligning those together would be valuable.
Okay, Commissioner Slatt, you're next, and then Commissioner Snyder.
Thanks. My phasing concern is, I think, very straightforward, which is that
Speak up,
community benefit.
your voice is fading out.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
No.
Not really. Barely.
Louder.
Closer, maybe?
Let's try that. How about now?
Good.
My phasing concern is very simple and short, which is just that the vast majority of the community benefit here seems to be contingent on a phase that requires Costco going away. And as the applicant has been very clear, Costco doesn't appear to be going away anytime soon. So I think we'll talk about it more next meeting with transportation, but definitely a lot of the transportation benefit comes in phase 2. And I'm just not confident that that's happening, in my lifetime. Not that I think I'm going to die anytime soon. But yeah, it's just something I think we need to really strongly consider with this application. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Steinberger.
I sort of wanted to pull this out a little bit more on sort of the Costco of it all. And I apologize, I was late, so you may be repeating yourselves, and I apologize for that. But they can say for 20-something years, it's their prerogative, and then at that point in time, y'all control the lease, and you can kindly say, please relocate?
Yes. In a simple world, yes.
Okay.
What is a very simple world, yes.
What is the less simple world?
Where we have 30 Costco's around the country, and Costco uses pressure and they want to stay.
And they want to stay. Okay. So
because
understand everything's business.
The way it works with Kimco is it's inevitable that I don't have one tenant in one location. That's it. So sure. I may want something from them somewhere else. So
that's fine. Okay.
Yeah, their lease expires in a little over 20 years.
Okay. And at this point, there's no indication that Costco wishes to find greener pasture somewhere else.
We've had extensive conversations with Costco, and this is a phenomenal store. So
it's very
right. So
very popular.
they're not going to just leave.
Okay, there has to be a kicker to make them want.
There'd have to be a reason, a dramatic reason that would take place, but they're not gonna just leave.
Okay, all right, I just want to kind of pull at that a teensy bit. Okay, thank you. And this is one of like the highest performing Costco's and the whatever, right? Okay, yep, figured, got it, okay.
And remember, that's huge amount of tax revenue for the county too, so.
I'm not trying to piss off Costco. For those reporting, I'm not trying to be on Costco's side. Just wanted to get a sense of sort of where the decisions were. Thank you. And Commissioner Schreiner is, an avid Costco member apparently. So there you go. Okay.
Commissioner Guevara.
Is there any chance that it could be redeveloped? I mean, leave Costco bottom retail and then build up some sort of.
So we have talked to Costco about that. And one, you can't build on top of an existing Costco the way it's today because it's not structured and built to hold anything above it. There's no roof loading, so we can't do that. And by the time I go and rip holes in the entire building and the entire roof, concrete piers down, it just wouldn't work for them. So what we'd have to do is take them out and rebuild them in the new configuration. It causes a couple problems. They're over 170,000 square feet. Even if I put them in 2 stories, we would not be able to get the grid that we want to go through with the road grid. So it would have to be like a 4-story Costco. And when you ask Costco that, they look at me like I have 3 heads. They're like, we're not building a 4-story Costco. And we want 180,000, 170,000 square feet. So we've asked them that question. They say, we have 20 years, we're going to be here. Their answer.
So the two locations where they've done that, as I understand it, so correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Like you just said, it's in a footprint. Well, first they're starting from scratch. So there's no operation interruption to worry about. And then 2, like you said, it's in a footprint that's so large, we couldn't fit it in the approved block plan street grid we have worked out.
Now, in 20 years, who knows? It could be, the world could be completely different. It's different from 2015. We did this plan the last time. So in 20 more years, maybe Costco says, no, we only need 40,000 square feet footprint. And then I could fit them in 1 block and yes, they could stay. But right now, today, having that conversation with them, no.
That's unfortunate.
Are there any multi-floor Costco's? I'm trying to think.
You said.
I believe there's 2.
Yeah.
There's two
One
mixed,
is
there's two mixed use. There's one in Los Angeles that's just about to open, and then there's one in Canada. But I don't believe any of them
are Los Angeles and Canada.
Yeah, but I don't believe it's a multi-story store. It's still a single-story floor.
It's just with stuff on top of it. So Costco itself is still one floor.
Right.
Yeah, I was thinking, it's not like I go to that many Costco's, but I don't think I've ever seen.
No.
Okay.
I mean, their whole theory is they're a warehouse, right? So they want the efficiency that their machines can go in and out, right? And so they are not looking at multi-level stores as a result. Again, who knows what will happen in 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, and then building off what Mr. Sladden said, I think a concern that's coming to mind here is that all of the majority of the benefits that we're seeing are hinging on, well, we'll see in 20 years, and that's kind of tough. I mean, is there any way you can maybe move some of that green space over to this left side of the property? I mean, like, I think in my mind there are contingency plans that are going to have to be in place in the event that Costco was. Sorry, we're not going much.
And that's why we took the office building off and put a park there in the interim condition. Because knowing that none of the green space came until Costco left, in the interim condition, if we move forward in 10 years with taking the mall down, what green space could we provide? And that's why we took the office building off until that future phase would come to provide that park there. The one that's under the red block.
Yeah. And that was definitely a major concern in 2015 when we got that approval. The same comment was made that too many of the community benefits, particularly the park space, is backloaded for the later phase. Right. So Matt and Chrissy and their team were very clear that we contacted them when the Pentagon City Plan was still in the works, and we told them we were thinking about this. Like, I think that we're due for, it's been another 8 years. The world has changed. We're going to come in, and they were very clear to us, like, find some earlier park space to deliver. So yeah, that was the genesis of the half acre.
How large is that space? The interim sort of space?
A half acre, about 22,000 square feet. And to Commissioner Lantelmi's point, I mean, maybe figure out a way to make that feel bigger, because that was a valid point that was made about that north-south street connection. Maybe it doesn't need to be a full service street the way we're depicting it here. Maybe we can use some interesting paving material.
And I will say that that calculation also does not include the sidewalk or the street trees. This is just the square footage that's inside of that. And I think we rounded down slightly to be kind of, so that it's more than 22,000 square feet total, but we were trying to be conservative.
And I know we're not getting into specifics, but what do you envision that park to be?
So we would work with Walter and the county to go through the typical charrette process where we get, we do the vision boards and have the stickers and really, we'd have some ideas. We'd have FICA or landscape architect come up with some concepts for feedback, but we'd really follow the community's lead on what they think the need is and what they'd like to see there.
Mr. Devanza?
Thanks. Feel free to say this has to wait until next time when we talk about community benefits. This is getting into that conversation. In terms of what the expected, right, there's the community benefit calculation for this open space, but also typically, right, it would, or maybe not, cover the cost. And sometimes there's money set aside for each building. And so in terms of the phasing, is there the anticipation that there would be some money set aside from each building project in some kind of county bank account, as happens for other kind of infrastructure projects or things like that, to fund then the eventual maintenance and creation of the larger park? Or would it all come from the eventual, whenever, if and when Costco ever goes away? And I ask because sometimes that money disappears, particularly when we're talking about a long period of time and accounting changes. It's been issues, from what I understand, where the county doesn't know how much money it has for certain projects and things like that. And so, especially when we're thinking about where, right, if we're talking about the B buildings happening sooner and then contributing some funds to a future park, but that park possibly happening decades down the road, that gets a little bit complicated in terms of phasing.
I think because we're one landowner, we don't need to do the kind of put money in a pot for a future park that's going to be built on someone else's property. Because it is still our property, we'll be able to build it. And so we won't have any of that accounting issues because we'll build it when we're able to build it. So I think all of them.
And maintain it.
Yeah, so the goal is that we would build it and maintain it. And so I don't think we'll have that accounting issue because it is all one property owner at this point.
And there'd be an easement on the big.
I was going to say the other community benefits, we're just going to focus on B1 residential tower. Anything above with the 2015 version establishing that, which is essentially the base at this point, 10% of that we have to be for. Also, I think increasing the sustainability goals. So the goal is really the starting point for those projects. That was not the case before. We just talked about the interim part, which would have to be designed, built, and maintained until such time as Costco would ultimately leave the site, if any of us are still around for that. So I think that's kind of the starting point for the community benefit discussion. Kind of go from there, but I do want to highlight some of the things we can already anticipate.
I have a question. It's more for staff. The glove designation, now that we're going up to 4+ FAR, and this is great location for high FAR. This is what we want density. But it has a lower designation than three other sides. The added density on this, is that still the appropriate glove designation?
I think it is the consistency.
So we should be really looking to recommend changing that?
Depending on what this process ends up.
So up is something that should be. can be on the table.
I think we need to explore that because we would not want to update the vision without, or at the cost of leaving the love designation to perpetuate a kind of inconsistency between what we already signal as potential appropriate levels of density basically compared to the accepted levels. And then I think it's low OAH right now.
Medium.
Medium.
Right. So the surrounding sites are high.
Right. It doesn't make any sense for this to be medium, to me, looking at what's there and what's surrounding it. And it's really going literally up.
Was there any discussion of that from the previous iteration? That they were trying to
2015?
Sort of a sculpted? Does anybody remember?
I think there's some guiding principles that speak to the location of height for the tallest buildings.
That's not consistent with high.
I can just say, from having been there, that it wasn't even contemplated because HQ2 hadn't been thought of yet. The Pentagon City Sector Plan update hadn't been thought of yet. So we were just working within the existing club, and it wasn't even on the table.
It was more of a height variation discussion rather than what is the density ceiling and how does that correspond with the appropriate levels we have for each general land use plan category.
And we definitely tiered from the metro. We definitely had the Whitmer go highest, and then all the buildings fan down from that, just like we're still doing, for sure.
But upping is consistent with the design principle, the principles for the area, not just for the donut, the whole of the donut, but everything around it. I mean, all of that to have a consistent club designation is consistent with what the vision is.
That's why I was curious if there was like a Central Park vibe that they were trying to develop. It doesn't seem like there was, so it's sort of.
You mean the glove category?
Yeah.
Well, I think before, I think there was a slide that mentioned we're at 2.6 RAR, which is generally where I think zoning CO 2.5 allows you to do. So there wasn't as big of a need, I think, to change either category. I think we're getting to a point now where neither zoning or the glove may reflect what the vision looks like.
And what is the appropriate, I mean, this is an appropriate site. It's right on a subway station. It's right by the highways. It has a number of bus lines going through it. Everything around on three sides is high. I don't see any policy reason why we would keep it low.
I see a lot of head shaking with this.
I mean, I think we're open to the fact of you know, change the full process, right? Because we do believe that we should fan down. So if the appropriate change we would have loved is at 14th Street, right? And so 14th Street North goes high density and then it stays south. I think we're open to that if that's something, because I think again we want to fit with this vision if we like something that we propose.
Yeah, the step down is not inconsistent with having that club category. It's still absolutely appropriate to do that, and that's again a good design principle.
Yeah.
And that's the way it's working in the rest of it. So that shouldn't be an issue or a block from doing it. But after I read through what the vision is for the block, it seems highly consistent with it as high problem.
Yeah, and I think the metro access and the surrounding vision is clear rationale. I think what would also help in this process is to better understand as the open space in the middle of the block expands, what is the overall impact as the surrounding buildings also go up? Because I don't think we've seen like a shade study right now with what the open space could have looked like back in 2015 and what it might look like now for these building heights. And that could be another marker of, is this the right level? Because open space expansion is great, but I think we also have to be mindful of what are we creating around.
We have some studies we can share. We did not put them today. I don't know if you have them to pull up, or I have them.
I have them. They're not in a presentation format. We do have a couple hands up, but we can.
Yes.
We can also read that at the next meeting.
Right.
So. Yeah, that's no problem. I mean, it just strikes me also moving the buildings to Burn Street makes a huge amount of sense because I fully agree with you that a retail street, retail on both sides would be more successful than one that has it only on one. So I think that's good urbanism. to have that street be lined on both sides by buildings rather than have it just open. So that I think is a very positive, personally, I think that's a positive change to this. Of course, it's going to be like 20, 30 years in the future, but nonetheless, it's nice to be aspirational.
I was going to add that I think, you know, my quick reaction to seeing the new diagram, it does make sense to have the southern exposure on the open space. I think, you know, that part of it, I thought was an improvement, not necessarily based on anything other than I think you just get more sunlight, you know, into that green space. So I think it just helps the notion of plants. I had a couple of just sort of checkbacks. It's not necessarily a question, but just making sure, and I'm just trying to look at the grid, you know, and I know that we're trying to break the super blocks and all that. But on 14th Street, cutting through the park, you know, just sort of what is the thinking behind making sure that the grid is there? Is that pretty much what we're doing? Just because, again, it's sort of an opportunity to create more of a contiguous green space, you know, on that 14th block of, I think it was S, block S. I don't have a block diagram here. Does staff have any thoughts on that?
On block F or B?
Well, essentially 14th Street on block F, right?
Where
This
Costco
is
is
the
now.
next phase conversation. I just want to touch base and make sure I understand the thinking. I'm not questioning it so much as I'm just trying to get a little bit of insight into the vision when the first study was done.
Yeah, this street here is what he's talking about. It cuts bisects the park, the open space.
Yeah, I mean, I can start that, and again, some of our transportation staff are going to join us next LRPC meeting. Transportation will be the focus, but this has a very similar approach as the Penn Place block did when they went through its process. Similar time, 2013, I think it was, where several different modes of travel were being prioritized. We didn't have the benefit of considering the potential open space gains should one of those connections become not vehicular oriented. Now, Penn Place, I think, was successful in convincing, creating a strong argument for that because they were all sharing one parking facility, likely redeveloping within a few years of one another, and there was one large tenant. It's unclear if that would be the case here, given you have two different office uses, residential, perhaps a hotel, and the degree to which I think all of that could be shared, and therefore, if you can't, what do we need to rely on those vehicular connections that create for loading, for security, for other purposes? It's a little bit unclear, but I think it's a valid question. Do we need all that? If those buildings themselves are going to arrive in different phases with very independent access points under different control, because it's if this full block redevelops, you know, who's to say that you have different management teams, potentially different ownerships at some point in the future.
Yeah,
I will say that
also.
I was just going to say that one thing that may go to your point, Leo, is that in 2015, and I think this is in the PDSP proffers, is that there was definitely a lot of discussion about periodically closing that street down to traffic and making it sort of a festival street, so that if there was an event or carnival or some sort of festival going on, you could consolidate the two open spaces to have one really big one.
Yeah, I very much encourage that because from what I understand from the proposal, the 14th Street, where the buildings are, is envisioned as a service street.
Yes.
So it's not a through street. It's where the deliveries are made, it's where the loading docks are. It's not one to have people go on. So having that other one, so you don't need that. It cuts through the park, easily being shut down or being removed. A lot of possibilities. Anyway, we have somebody else who's raised their hand. Steve Smith.
Yes, Steve Smith with Cooper Carey. I think you guys, it was obvious enough with the green space and its placement and how we feel about it being a better urban grid, but that green space becomes the central organizing element for all 6 blocks. All these buildings now have breathing room, and look at the rhythm from, if you're going left to right, street, building, green space, building, street. every one of those gets advantage of looking at it from a building standpoint, but also as we step down those buildings as they move to the south, look at the two buildings on the other side of 15th. They look out at green space now, not out at a building. So those people in those condos are going to benefit from that as well. And by increasing the overall square footage, we just have so much more flexibility to engage in a process with you as to what it wants to be at the end of the day. And flexibility is always the biggest thing. And Greg, you may have made this point, but some of the mic was cutting out here or there. We're trying to set loading areas across from each other. So they're not across from a lobby. They're not across from a really public space. So we're thinking about that in the layout of these future buildings as well.
Right, all good points. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I wasn't quite done. So I would just encourage us to think about 14, particularly on that eastern block, as a potential like nerve, you know, or something that doesn't have to be used all the time. It really, you know, no. Evan's the one that mentioned that was envisioned as a potential activity street. So I think that's great. The other question I had, talking about programming. Everything went up on your proposal, and again, this is just a sort of edification question, but retail went down. So I feel like there's some obvious answers there, but I'd love to hear more a little bit about that and what sort of the market is calling for. And then also, it used to be that we used to talk about daytime versus nighttime commerce. I'm guessing that's all gone away by now, and this is sort of really a real estate sort of question. So that we don't have like, you know, K Street that has lunch restaurants that close at 3 p.m. because everyone's gone home. And I'm assuming that that's sort of the strategy that we're taking here, that this is like fully residential. We're moving more towards residential and assuming that people stay at home working, ergo daytime restaurant use and all that is still functioning.
So it's an HCR neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly. Is that how we're sort of approaching this?
So ever since the pandemic, all we've heard from retailers is they all want to get smaller, particularly like a Best Buy. For an example, we already know they want to get smaller. So before, when they were building 50,000 square feet, now they can survive with 20. Because what they've done is a couple things. They've increased their third mile delivery so that everything doesn't have to come to the store. And you don't, most of the time, if you go buy a TV, you'll just have it delivered directly and everything goes to the store. So almost all the retailers, not just but Dick's is the same way. Everybody is getting smaller. And that's one of IKEA now. Well, we have that. We have the small IKEA that now opened in the mall. That they don't have any storage there, but they can get it to you the next day from their warehouse, or if not that day. So because of that, everyone wants to be smaller, and we're hearing that, which is why we're seeing the downsize in the retail. Now, it doesn't get smaller, grocery stores. Grocery stores are still going bigger and larger.
And Costco.
And Costco. They're still the same. We have not seen them getting smaller, but the rest of retail seems to be shrinking, getting smaller. For the activity, our whole goal is always to get the activity and the light on the street as late as we can. Are there still breakfast places like a First Watch that are open from 7 to 3 and are doing phenomenal? And we would probably do a deal with one of them for that activity. But our goal always to get a mixture, because what we don't want is one side of a building dark at, to your point, now with unfortunately daylight savings time at 4:30. So no, that's always our goal, is to keep it well lit, and because the lights being on make it more attractive and more welcoming for people to come by.
And on a similar vein, sorry to talk so much. The last question, same thing with office. I was pleasantly surprised to see, or just surprised to see, a bump up on the office space, because I feel like we have quite a bit of vacancy. So what's your thinking on that?
The metro stop, we still believe, makes us unique, that it has an attraction for the potential for office. Without that, I would tell you, I don't think this, office, we would probably not agree. But the metro stop always has that uniqueness that we believe there's still a need for office. Plus, with Amazon right across the street, that one right on the corner, it wants to be that also to play off of Amazon.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Devanto?
Thanks. A couple comments about a couple things that have been said in the question. First, affirming that yes, I think the open space change is probably pretty appropriate for us in Southampton. Not only, you know, it helps, I'm sure people would rather look, and well, I don't know. Some people might rather prefer green space rather than buildings, but also certainly construction impact. But also in terms of the step downs, right? We're 4 stories and having a building front, the Claridge House makes a lot more sense. The question, I was going to question kind of a comment around the 14th Street and maybe a request to look at the slides around the way where 14th Street has really become in some ways the primary entranceway and pedestrian heart into Met Park based on kind of my observations. And that's a really important part about building out and breaking up the grid is the kind of pedestrian access. I was wondering if you could kind of point out where the new kind of pedestrian particularly areas are. And one area I have in question is we do have at Southampton and Claridge House a shared driveway kind of mid-block now between, I guess, the new Grant and then Fern. And I don't think I see a proposed pedestrian crossing there. Those are kind of a big block. So I was kind of wondering if there's any consideration of improved pedestrian access as kind of a part of this, especially across 15th Street.
So if I'm understanding right, you're asking about crosswalks across 15th Street. Is that both?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I'm interested in where the new crosswalks are as part of this, across Hayes, across. I don't think there'd be any across Fern, but maybe. But also particularly, I don't think I'm seeing a crosswalk between Grant and Fern along 15th, and I think that might be beneficial. I wonder if that was discussed.
So I think at this point, we're open to those conversations. For those of you who drive by 15th Street, the light for 15th and Grant Street is in process of being installed, right? And so the goal is that that'll be complete in the next month or so, and then we'll start the 30-day flashing, right? So that will have an improved pedestrian experience already. And I think the end goal for us would be we would eventually end up with kind of 4 crosswalks there that go across 15th Street. Right now, I think the current plan only has 1, but in the full park build out, we'd aim for 2 that go across on either side of the intersection. We did not plan for any in the middle. I think we would want to look at that with our traffic team, mainly because the road curves, and I would be hesitant for vehicle sight lines around that. But we're not against it in any means. And so I think we would just want to look at the safety before we fully propose that. But again, I think the other thing to note is that we don't know where the major pedestrian paths through those parks will be. And so I think that's where you would want that other third kind of a crosswalk in the middle of that block. And so I think that would kind of partner with the design process once we get there to kind of make sure that where the green ribbon path goes is the sidewalk. As for the crosswalks across Hayes, we relocated 13th Street to actually be aligned with where the crosswalk is today. So the big crosswalk that goes from the mall, from basically Nordstrom's to Pentagon Center, that is now 13th Street. So when we relocated that street north, it's now at that crosswalk location. So we would actually use what's there today even more efficiently than how it is being used today.
Thanks. Another place you might want to just consider in terms of human behavior crosswalk is along the 14th Street between Fern and Grant, right? If you're having these two kind of buildings, F and D, across from each other, you may have people naturally trying to cross kind of at that western end of them rather than kind of go to the crosswalks either at Grant or Fern. So that might be another place where you might have human behavior prone to jaywalking.
Yeah, I agreed. I think as we figure out the park design and where the green ribbon goes through, you'll probably have mid-block crosswalks at each of those points to connect the green ribbon all the way through. So where those locations actually are, I don't think we can say at this moment, but I would estimate that there is a mid-block kind of creating that easy path all the way through.
We've actually learned that on 14th Street since the Milton opened. If you've been there, when you come out of the mall, the intent was you were supposed to go slightly to the right and there's a crosswalk across. Well, no one was doing that. They were hopping through the dirt and going that way. And then we put barricades up and they were still, I don't even know how they got through there and walking down the middle. So actually we're working on, we'll be coming with a very minor thing to put sidewalks today on both sides of 14th Street. So to promote whether you want, because no one wants to walk across the street, to walk 100 feet down, to walk back across the street. So we're working now, we've surveyed it, we've got some design to come up to put a sidewalk on both sides, running by the existing guard shack for the gate, running down through that side also.
That's great. As a person who has done all of those things.
Yes, desire, pedestrian desire lines, yes, always mention them. I was thinking about Met Park and how it's kind of a model for a lot of what you're going to be doing. I'm really excited about how well it's come out and how successful 14th Street is over there. The traffic is really, every time I'm over there all the time, it's really low volume. And the drivers are driving slowly, they're cautious, they're yielding to people, which doesn't happen on side streets. It feels green, you can make it greener. It has a wide variety of retail. It's active all the time. You know, it's active at night, it's active in the daytime. They have you know, their farmers markets and other special activities and concerts. You could do all that and really make it 24/7. So I think it's a great model as things are being built out there, and it's a good thing to watch.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Strider.
Yeah, so within this map, where I'm having a difficulty understanding the cross streets. I know that you need them for loading dock, that sort of thing, but do we need those to be open up for just regular, your average Joe driving, through there? And my question would be, is where would the parking garages be for these structures? Would they be sort of in the middle of this block here? Would drivers need to drive in there, or could they just kind of access it from the side?
So we have tried to put our access for loading and garage access off of 13th and 14th, because you don't want it along, the perimeter roads today.
Right.
The grid really was driven, and you remember back in 2015 when we got what we have now. That was really the driving force of the grid, and I think everyone wanted us to supply that grid, which is where it came from. So we've tried to honor that, because that's what we heard extensively back then, and stay within keeping the grid, but shifting it so that it sort of works a little better and it's more phase based on what we've learned.
So you can kind of see it here. We'll start with the Milton that just opened, where their existing garage entrance are the loading dock. We placed opposite B1C, right? And so we're still trying to play with where the best above and below grade ramps are. So this option has a ramp here, but we also have an option that keeps it all this way, right? So that's here. And then when I move to D and F, we have them across from each other again on 14th Street. We placed these where they are because we need to have a specific stacking distance back from the intersection at Fern.
Right.
So that's kind of why this looks like a little wart on the back of D, but it's really to get that stacking distance back from the intersection. And then if I go up here to B and E, we've put them across from each other at Grant Street. So while we don't have any curb cuts on 13th Street, we do see that as our active kind of main street, if you will, with parallel teaser parking for retailers, right? And so that's, your quick pickup and all of those kind of things. And then we see the same thing kind of extending down on Grand Street at the park face. I think the idea would be that there's opportunities that we could make kind of booters, like we talked about, both on the park portions of 14th Street, as well as Grant Street, as well as then 13th Street. So that if there is an opportunity that we could have an art festival and close down the entire length of 13th Street, we could do that, right? However, we do think, going back to previous conversations, we thought the street grid was still important. We like the porosity and the temporary, the short-term retail parking. And so I think there's conversations, but that's really how we got here.
Yeah, and my thought process is that, it's this area that's very metro accessible. We're trying to make it very pedestrian friendly. It doesn't make sense to have 3 large vehicular roads cutting right through it. To me, that just, I understand the reasoning, but to me, that's something that I'm kind of grappling with.
Okay, do we have any further comments, questions, ideas? Okay, I think we're pretty much exhausted our discussions tonight, which is fine. We will be having another one. We haven't scheduled yet, but yeah.
We get to public comments?
Yes, we will, because since we're wrapping up here, I want to make sure we get the final at the table, then it'll be your turn. So I just want to make clear, no final comment. Or Commissioner Kagar, or Commissioner Van Hine, or Commissioner Strider, or Commissioner online, Commissioner Haynes, Slat, Ms. Freshman, anybody further there? Commissioner Sarley? No further comments?
No, I was just checking our list, make sure we covered everything. So I think we're pretty good.
Cool. Very good. Okay, then at this point, I think we can move on to public comments. Who do we have up?
Just put out the comment in the notes section. So please provide your name in the chat if you would like to speak.
Otherwise, we'll use the person here right now. So.
All right. Thanks. Since I'm the alternate.
2 minutes.
I'm Nick Giacobbe. I'm the alternate for Aurora Highlands. I've been covering this project since the early 90s. So this has been 3 decades of covering this. We've always pushed for this to be the maximum density of the neighborhood, and I'm glad to see the applicant coming in for their periodic density increase. I think this is what should be happening. This is on the metro. This is what we really want to be doing. Glad to see you incorporating the green ribbon. The street grid is really critical. We've got to break up these super blocks. We're working on breaking up super blocks all over the neighborhood. I think you're doing a good job on that. I like the realignment of the open space. That makes a whole lot of sense. One of my questions, though, is building B seems really odd at only 2 stories. Earlier, it was 5 stories. For some reason, you reduced it. There might be a way to reduce the footprint of that building and go higher. It just seems that that's a place where you should have a little bit more density. And my other question is, as far as, when you get to the point of doing the mix between residential, hotel, if there's a way to find some opportunities for ownership through condominiums, that would be great. We're always looking for ways to get some home ownership in the neighborhood. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We've moved to our online commenter, Mr. Jacoby. You are next.
That's me.
Oh, that was you. I guess we don't have anybody online. Okay, I guess we're done for the evening then. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your thoughtful comments. I think it's been a productive session. And I look forward to having our next LRPC whenever that is.
We'll be in touch.
We'll be in touch.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Would it always be on a Monday?
No, it'll be in time. It will not be on a Friday.
You're on a lift? Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm only asking just on